Welcome to Myth Madness. The last two episodes covered the stories of Jamshid and Zahhak. In Persian mythology, Jamshid was at first a benevolent king of the world. After Jamshid's fall from grace, Zahhak seized the throne and took over the world. But that was not the end of Jamshid. He went into hiding. Zahhak sent messengers and spies throughout the world, to the kings of Rum, India, and China. Zahhak told all of them to look wherever they could for the deposed Jamshid, whether he was living in the mountains with the panthers or under water with the crocodiles. Wherever he was, if they found him, Jamshid was to be chained and brought to Zahhak's court. The search was unsuccessful. Jamshid's location remained unknown, and according to the Shahnameh, a full 100 years went by before Jamshid was tracked down and killed by Zahhak. That, of course, leaves a big open question. 100 years is a long time, so what was Jamshid doing all that time? The Shahnameh epic poem says nothing. It does not have this particular answer for us. So, to get it, we will have to look outside of the Shahnameh. As I discussed in the previous episodes, Persian mythology has multiple layers of cultural influence, and there are many literary sources influenced by different cultural contexts. The Shahnameh is the best one. It's relatively well known, still important today, and it covers a wide selection of mythological material. The poem was completed in 1010 AD, after the Persians' conversion to Islam. But it is not the only epic poem that was written around that period. There are others, and some of them cover stories the author of the Shahnameh left out. The Garshaspnama is one of these poems. It was completed around 1066 AD by a man named Asadi Tusi. Tusi was likely inspired by the Shahnameh, and the Garshaspnama focuses on the stories surrounding a legendary hero named Garshasp, who incidentally barely appears in the Shahnameh. What does this have to do with Jamshid? Well, the beginning of the Garshaspnama gives us our answer to what Jamshid was doing for that missing 100 years. And that will be the focus of this episode. As I already mentioned, when Jamshid was deposed by Zahhak, he went on the run. The old king wandered from place to place. He slept on the steppes and the mountainsides like a wild animal. He avoided cities, and only ever entered small towns when necessary, so that no one would recognize him. After 10 years, many hardships, and a long journey, he arrived in Sistan, a place in what is now eastern Iran and western Afghanistan. In real life today, this place is mostly dry desert, but the Garshaspnama describes it as a paradise. Its valleys were like gardens, its waters were pure and brisk, it's pleasant, and its people were brave. Sistan was ruled by a king named Gurang, a great man. In any group of 100 kings, he had no equal. He was like a sword without rust, and he ruled from a capital city called Zabul. The king of Sistan had a daughter who was very charming and very beautiful. In the Garshaspnama, her name is not given, but in another Persian text, her name is Perichera. She had a mouth like a piece of red coral, and eyes like 2 daffodils. The musky locks of her hair made her bedchamber smell like a garden. At the same time, she was no simple damsel. The princess was a hero who hunted lions for fun. She rode a horse and had been taught from a young age how to use a bow. Men came from all over the land to ask the king about his daughter's availability, but the king never arranged a marriage between her and any of these suitors. Instead, he told his daughter that she could choose her husband and marry whoever pleased her. The princess, meanwhile, never entertained any of these suitors. She didn't even see them. Each one was turned away and left the palace in shame. Why did she do this? Well, the princess had a wet nurse, or handmaiden, who was from Kabul, and was very clever. She knew magic and could determine the hidden secrets of heaven. The nurse had secretly told the princess that she would marry a noble king, that no human being was like him in goodness and knowledge, and that the couple would have a son with a handsome face and the blessing of the Creator. When Jamshid finally arrived in Sistan, he had no reason to go to Sabul. It was autumn, and the countryside was beautiful. Tree branches dipped from the weight of ripe fruit, and fresh rain dripped gently from the air. So Jamshid wandered on, admiring the land, and eventually passed rows of cypress and pomegranate trees. He came to a river, running through the middle of a wide meadow. He spied a diver swimming in its water, and a beautiful walled garden standing near the riverbank. Jamshid liked what he saw, and he left the path to go rest in the shade. Sure enough, in the garden was King Gurang's daughter. The princess drank wine with her servant girls and ate sweet fruit while listening to musicians. One of the servants looked through the gate of the garden and saw the face of Jamshid staring back at her. He was a fine-looking man, and even though his cheeks were obscured by dust and sweat, a royal splendor radiated from him. He asked the servant girl for 3 cups of wine to free his soul from the torments of the road. The servant girl went back inside the garden and told the princess what she had seen and heard. The princess smiled. If the man wanted wine, then he would want entertainment, a table, music, a pretty face, and songs. She went to see him, and when she saw the beauty of Jamshid, love entered her heart. Jamshid asked her who she was, and she told him her father was the king of Sistan, and she was allowed to choose her own husband. She invited Jamshid into the garden. Jamshid, for his part, liked the way she looked and talked, and he thought that if she found out his secret, his identity, he would not be afraid. Once in the garden, the princess showed Jamshid slender cypress trees, flower beds, and fruit trees, and a table set with fine food. The princess was amazed at the visitor's dignity. She noticed his splendor and wondered if he was a king. She asked him, "You really love the wine. Do you want anything other than wine?" And he told her about the benefits of wine and what happened when someone drank too much. Listening to him speak, she recognized him. This was the old King Jamshid with a sunburnt face. She recognized it from the pictures on ceilings and walls, and a piece of dark blue silk decorated with his face that was kept back at the palace. These pictures were hung up by the followers of Zahhak, so that people would recognize the old king and arrest him if he ever showed up. The princess said nothing and continued to eat her meal. After the meal, they washed their hands with rosewater and perfume and went into gold-decorated tents to listen to a musician from Kabul. The maidservants lined up in rows and played on lutes, flutes, and zithers. At one point, 2 doves flew over them, and the princess asked Jamshid which one she should shoot down. Jamshid told her it would be proper if he went first. She handed him the bow, and he shot one of the birds down from 100 paces away. In making the shot, the princess became completely convinced that this wandering man was Jamshid, son of Tamaraz. She was amazed at the shot and his powerful chest. She praised his splendor and drank a toast to his health. The princess took up the bow. She said if she hit the other bird, she would become Jamshid's wife. She did so. They continued drinking, and finally the nurse arrived. When she saw Jamshid, the nurse told the princess this was the man that she imagined for her. The princess told the nurse to fetch the silk with Jamshid's face from the palace. When the nurse returned, the silk was placed in front of Jamshid. When he saw his own printed face staring back at him, he became sad. He remembered his crown and royal throne, which Zahhak had taken from him. The princess asked, "Why did you get sad over the silk? Aren't you planning on being close to me tonight?" Jamshid told her that on the silk he saw the face of King Jamshid. It reminded him of the king's splendor. "I am amazed at the evil character of heaven, who withdrew love from such a king. The world now has an ugly ruler, with serpents rising from his shoulders, and a face like the evil spirit Ahriman. Fate knows no wrong or right. It beats us all sore and sad." Jamshid then began to cry. When the princess saw this, tears welled up in her eyes too. She ordered everyone away, until it was just her nurse, and Jamshid. When they were alone, she told him, "I know your secret, that you are Jamshid." She told him she was his, if he took her as his wife. Jamshid told her she was mistaken, and that his name was Mahan, But the princess was not convinced. "You are Jamshid. If a king hides his name, his royal far does not remain hidden. I have beauty, character, and mind. What excuse do you have for not liking me? Do not make this sunny day a day of mourning." The princess wiped her tears with her sleeves, and Jamshid's heart was softened. But he told her he would not reveal his secret. If her father found out and became his enemy, for some reason, he might hand him over to Zahhak. The princess promised to tell no one, and again asked him to stay and live happily with her. And so, after a long conversation, containing flattery, love, vows, and advice, Jamshid agreed to marry the princess. Jamshid and the king's daughter were married in the garden. It was basically an elopement, and she did not tell her father. The couple had a party, with dancers, cupbearers, and harp players. They had more cups of wine and drank all night until the sun began to rise in the west. The princess secretly led Jamshid to the palace, where she had a golden pavilion prepared. They sat face to face, night and day, kissing and embracing. When she finally rose from her time with her new husband, as the Garshaspnama says, a new flower blossomed in her spring garden. By this time, the king of Sistan had not seen his daughter for a few days, and was suspicious. He had a female servant from Kandahar, who had a face that made the moon darken with envy. He told her that when his daughter finally came to meet with him, she was to watch the princess, and find out what his daughter was hiding. When the princess arrived, she sat down with her father and talked. He gave her money from his treasury, and told her about his new servant from Kandahar. He told his daughter the servant was a dancer, played the harp, and wasn't interested in men because she only liked women. The princess agreed to take the woman back to her own section of the palace. A few days later, and the clever servant from Kandahar learned the princess's secret. She snuck away and told the king what she had found out about his daughter. No one said anything. The king waited until his daughter came for another visit. When the king finally saw his daughter, he frowned in anger and began to yell. "Wicked, impudent girl! Have you become stubborn that you do not take me into account in any matter? You have thrown the crown of wisdom off your head, and torn the garment of modesty from your body. You think I don't know your secret? That I don't read it on your face like a book? What your tongue doesn't tell me, the color of your face does. Before, your cheeks were like roses, but now your roses have shed their petals. Will you not tell me who is your companion at home? Who is this stranger you hide behind a curtain? I know nothing of your deeds, nor of your husband. The wise men are right to say, if you have daughters, it is better they be underground. A father's greatest enemy is the dishonor of his children." The princess bowed before the king and touched her forehead to the ground. She told him he was right not to expect anything out of the ordinary from her, and that she was not the type to bring shame to the family. But, she reminded him, he told her before she could pick her husband. Now she had found one, and he was a king better than any other king in the world. Her husband was Jamshid. Hearing this, the king was overjoyed. He thanked her for the great news, and the princess smiled. And then the king said, "I will tie Jamshid to a horse and send him to King Zahhak." He offered a great volume of treasures and rulership of a whole province to whoever bound Jamshid. At this, the princess lost hope, and was stricken with sadness in front of her father. Her curls dropped over her face. She criticized her father's greed and told him it was better for him to become Jamshid's friend, for if he wanted to separate her from Jamshid, then he would first have to separate her head from her shoulders. The king was moved by her words and relented. He told her Jamshid would be safe with them, and he would keep his identity secret. The following morning, the king went to his daughter's part of the palace and greeted her new husband, Jamshid. Jamshid and the princess remained hidden in the palace for 9 months. During that time, her father kept his daughter's area well stored with food. Finally, the rosy-cheeked princess gave birth to a son. He shined like the sun, was pure like a peri, in form like the spirit Sarush, and with a face like his father's. The boy was named Tur. The princess's father, the king, proclaimed Tur heir to the throne of Zabul. Tur grew up and reached 15 years of age. He had such intelligence, wisdom, and radiance that he got the uneasy attention of everyone around him. Everyone who saw portraits of Jamshid put up across the land, and then looked at Tur, could not help but think he was the son of the deposed king. Most people kept it a secret. However, it was only a matter of time before rumors spread. Those whispers eventually reached the king of Zabul. He immediately went to Jamshid and warned him that sooner or later word would reach Zahhak, who with a face like Ahriman's and shoulders adorned with 2 snakes would destroy them both. He told Jamshid to not worry about Zabul and save himself. So, on a dark, foggy night, Jamshid told no one and made his escape. He left the country and went to India. He stayed there for a time and then crossed the border into China. The author of the Garshaspnama does not go into a lot of detail on the fate of Jamshid after that. He even makes a point of saying that everyone knows what happened to Jamshid in China. As I mentioned in the previous episode, Zahhak finally caught up with Jamshid in China. Jamshid was seized, and Zahhak had him stretched out and sawed in half. In a couple short lines of poetry only, the Garshaspnama says the same. Back in Zabul, someone finally got around to telling the princess about Jamshid's flight from the palace. She was devastated. She didn't eat or sleep, only cried. Her cypress body became like straw. After a month, on a night when the moon waxed, this human moon, this poor princess, drank a vial of poison and killed herself. Things turned out better for their son Tur. He grew up to be a brave warrior and a superb athlete, the pinnacle of his entire family. His grandfather, the king of Sistan, gifted him with riches and invested him with royal titles. He married Tur to another princess in the royal family. The happy couple had a son named Chidasp, but the good times were not to remain. A year later, Tur was dead, but like his father, Chidasp grew tall like a cypress and gained a good reputation. The heavens favored him, and his head was covered with glory. Chidasp eventually ascended to the throne, married a noblewoman, and had his own son named Tvorg. Tvorg grew quickly. By the time he was 10 years old, he was stronger than both his father and grandfather had ever been. No one could resist him when he swung a mace. He could throw a javelin higher than the moon and shoot an arrow over a mountain range. One day, Chidasp was busy preparing an army to march against the ruler of Kabul, a kingdom nearby and also the name for the modern-day capital of Afghanistan. When Tvorg saw his father's soldiers, he wanted to join them, but his father told him he was still too small. Tvorg pointed out that we do not always measure something's value by its size. He asked his father how he could achieve greatness if he was only left balls and games to play with. Chidasp was pleased with his son's bravery. He gave Tvorg a hug and called for everything Tvorg would need: a coat of mail, a helmet, a golden shield, a saber, a battle axe, a club, a tall elephant to ride, and finally a banner showing a black lion. Chidasp made the 10-year-old Tvorg one of his generals, and the army marched off to fight the enemy in Kabul. Meanwhile, the king of Kabul had his own heroes of great strength. The king there had a son named Surend, who could cut through steel as if it was silk, and fought under a flag decorated with a moon. He joined his own country's army and readied the troops for the arrival of Chidasp and the Sistani army. When the two armies came together, the battle began. The sound of conch and trumpet filled the air. Dust was everywhere, and the sea swelled with runoff blood. The bodies of dead men formed piles like mountains. Tvorg found his father, and saber in hand, asked him to point out where Surend stalked the field. Tvorg rushed his horse towards the other prince. Tvorg cut through the enemy army, using his saber, club, and spear to kill anyone in his way. Surend rushed forward and smashed Tvorg on the head with his club. But Tvorg was not stunned. He landed a blow and grabbed Surend from his own saddle, carrying him away to throw the enemy prince at Chidasp's feet. Here is a gift from Kabul. From now on, do not call me a child. I am a soldier. With the fall of their prince, the enemy army broke ranks and fled. Tvorg and the bold men of Zabul rode behind them and struck down as many as they could. When the army of Sistan left, the king of Kabul feared the return of Chadasp's army. He paid a heavy tribute and ransomed his son Surend back to Kabul. In Sistan, time passed and Chadasp died. Tvorg became king and had his own son named Chem, who people said was just as beautiful as his ancestor Jamshid. There is nothing else to say about Chem, but he had a son named Athrat. Athrat grew up to be another great king. He was generous to his subjects and dominated the neighboring lands. His treasury was full of the possessions of defeated kings, and his court swelled with crowds of important people. Athrat had a son who would be greater than any of his predecessors. This is Garshasp. We finally come to him. It has been 700 years since the birth of Tur. Part of the reason the king's court was so full was because people were busy staring, stunned, at Athrat's wife and his newborn baby. In one day, Garshasp grew to the size of a 1-month-old child. In a month, he was like a 1-year-old. He outgrew milk and began horse riding and fox hunting. Instead of soft silk, the boy dressed in chainmail. Instead of toys, he asked for a bow, arrows, and a club to play with. Instead of sleep, he wanted battle. Instead of his nursemaid, he wanted lions and panthers. At 10 years old, Garshasp was taller than a full-grown man. One day, he knocked out a warrior with a single punch. At 14, he was able to grab the back legs of a fleeing elephant and hold it in place. At feasts, he drank from a 60-liter wine cup. Garshasp could make fire from the sparks off his spear and then throw that spear straight through the chests of 10 breastplates. When angry, he grabbed warriors by their belts and lifted them off their horses. He pulled off mountaintops with a lasso and defeated entire armies single-handedly. He was a hero, and the Garshaspnama gives us this hero's adventures. In this way, thanks to the Garshaspnama, we have an answer to our main question. What did Jamshid do after he was deposed by Zahhak, but before he was killed? Jamshid wandered the earth, and eventually found himself in Sistan, where he married the local princess and so became a member of Sistan's royal family. Jamshid did not stick around for long, but he and the princess established a line of powerful hero kings. There was Tur, then Chadasp, Tvorg, Chem, and then Athrat. Finally, there's Garshasp, who is the best and strongest hero in the line so far, and whose adventures are the subject of the Garshaspnama poem. Answering the question of what Jamshid got up to gives us Garshasp's origin story, and a pretty illustrious origin at that. In Persian mythology, it doesn't get much better than having Jamshid as an ancestor. And that's all for today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. As always, thank you for listening.